Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unstructured Unlocked. I'm co-host Michelle Gouveia.
And I'm co-host Chris Wells.
And today we are joined by Terry Luciani, the vendor ecosystem leader at EY. Terry, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, guys. Really excited to be here. Happy to chat with you. I'm coming in from our EY Nexus team, where I get to work with all the different ecosystem partners. So I think this is a perfect place to chat with you about technology, startups, and just hopefully have a good time.
That's great.
Awesome. We're excited. So Terry, we typically start off by having our guests share with the audience a little bit about their background. So if you wouldn't mind kind of checking through your resume, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I spent nearly 22 years before I came to EY at a really large insurer in a couple of different roles, but over 10 years in enterprise innovation. And as part of that, we did a whole bunch of stuff to drive innovation across the company, whether it was more internally focused like crowdsourcing or facilitated innovation, or it was what we'd call co-innovation, working with external parties. And that meant really cultivating an ecosystem of VC partners and all of the startups, bringing them in, building structured experiments, built an accelerator, ran a lab, academic relationships. So just a lot of experience in the space, a lot of fun working with founders, and really trying to disrupt the way things were done, leveraging their incredible capabilities. So I think that's probably where it all fits together today. And that background really helped me as I started looking at other opportunities and joined EY, and am beginning to cultivate that ecosystem there that we leverage as part of our Nexus solution.
So I'm interested on that, Terry, in understanding where you saw the most fruit. Was it internal? Was it external partnerships? How did that break down?
Where I saw the most fruit where? Like at ShopRite or like in New York Live?
Well, you pick the context, you're the guest, but I was thinking in large insurers, are you more successful building internally or are the partnerships more useful?
I mean, I definitely have a bias here. And my bias is that partnerships is a key to success. I think there is so much value when you have large enterprises, large insurers, and startups working together. It used to feel like, being part of a large insurer, I sort of saw the evolution. It used to feel like there was almost a can't work with startups, afraid of startups feeling. But I think things have really changed over the last few years. And, you see now much more of a willingness and acceptance, recognition that there is an incredible value that comes from those partnerships, right? You see the growth in CVCs, you see the growth in corporate innovation teams. I think enterprises, large insurers have really come around to the recognition that there's a lot of value there. So I have a bias and I have an opinion here.
I think, Terry, on that, what I've seen too is the trajectory of early on when startups were coming in to try and disrupt this whole insurance industry, right? There was a distrust of what they were bringing to the table. There was also a lot of friction, I think, for being able to partner, and technology's come a long way so that if you do want to test something out, there are exceptions, obviously, but it's pretty quick to stand up a pilot or a POC and validate the solution that those startups are bringing, and therefore it happens much faster than way back where you had to go through a whole long assessment. Technology wasn't where it was today. Insurance carriers weren't ready to connect with different technologies that were outside of their four walls. So I agree with you. I'm on the partnership train, but I think there's, in addition to an openness to try and partner, I think technology has come a long way to support, those desired outcomes.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I'm smiling a little bit because of your use of the words quick and fast. I think it has to be taken into context when we talk about, and I mean this as part of the insurance industry. As we talk about the industry, we can get better at that. But I think that's fair. I think the tech has come a long way. I think the structure and the processes have come a long way. So I definitely I see where you're coming from.
I think I was quicker to buy than build, always. Even if your definition of quick in the insurance industry is slow by any other industry.
Buy is hard. Build is hard. Build is really hard. And I mean, it really depends on the company. When you sort of sit there between buy, build, and partner and try to make those decisions, I think it's a lot of the culture and the organizational structure, but build is hard. Could be the right thing to do, could make a lot of sense, but it's hard.
Yeah. So let's feather that a little bit more. When is build the right choice?
Oh, that's a tough one, right? I think the one example I can give that most people will go to is when there's a gap. I think a lot of people talk about, we're looking in the market, we don't see the capability there. I'm also a fan when you think about build, as in you think about your secret recipe for your soda or your 11 herbs and spices, right? Whatever the secret recipe stuff is, that might be the area where you want to focus on build. You don't necessarily care about, I can use the same reporting engine as everyone else. I might do the same, workflow engine, but this particular area, my underwriting, is so core to who we are and what we do. It's so differentiated. Maybe we should build there. So that's some of the thinking, but I think a lot of companies have different reasons, and for those companies, they might be the right thing to do.
Okay. So that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is, and you alluded to this a bit, but what really is the value prop for a startup for a large insurer? What's their value prop working with a startup? And feel free to say it depends. That's one of our catchphrases.
I'm waiting for my t-shirt still, by the way.
Yeah. It's in the mail.
Well, if we're handing out, let's go with the hoodie. Come on, we're turning into the winter months here. That'd be nice.
True.
So I've said this so many times, but I really do believe it. I think founders are incredible and just incredible people, right? I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. I grew up loving Star Wars, and I look at founders a bit like a combination of some of my favorite Star Wars characters. And when I say my favorite Star Wars characters, you'll know I'm a little bit older, right? Because I look at it as a founder is a combination of the brains of Princess Leia, right? The faith of a Luke Skywalker, and the guts or insanity of a Han Solo. And they're sort of combined all in one. So to me, I think of founders as this rare breed. They choose to do this thing that is insanely hard, and they go at it every morning. They pop at it. Well, maybe they don't go to sleep at night. So they do it all the time, 24 hours a day. They are beyond dedicated to delivering the solution. They are so hungry. And I'm constantly floored by just the way they go about it. This is such a generalization, and I'll probably get in trouble, but what the right startup can do in 3 months for $50,000, I think takes some companies 3 years and $5 million, and it never even gets done. I know I'm exaggerating, but there's a bit of truth to it. And I saw it firsthand, right? Enterprises can, with the right processes and the right support, just accelerate the delivery of disruption, and disruption being a positive, but disruption through partnerships with startups.
50 grand might be the cost of getting the project plan together.
Well, we talk early stage or later stage startups, but I think, you get the right mix of that hungry founder focused on a solution, partnering with a company that's going to be supportive and understand some of the challenges, and things can happen, really amazing things. So I believe that value proposition, going back to the first question, right? I think it's so strong to partner with these companies. And it's not just because I'm on a podcast with an incredible company, Indico. It's not just that reason.
Well, Terry, I want to circle back to you mentioned CVCs earlier. And obviously I'm in the VC space. So I'd love to get your thoughts, because everything that you just talked about is part of how we think about our role, right? As we find the entrepreneur and the startup solution, and we identify, the business need in the industry. We vet the technology and the team, and we say we think that this is going to be successful, right? And then once we make an investment, it starts to say, okay, how do we help support you with your business development? How do we get you in contact with the right people? How do we teach you or support you in selling to these large insurers? So I know kind of how we think about it. VCs and CVCs all have, there's a variety of strategies that they can implement, right? I'm not sure if you had a CVC in any of the firms you were working with prior, but how do you think about that relationship in identifying startups that are good partners, or vetting startups once, there's been a business need identified?
Yeah, I have worked with CVCs in the past, and I think, if I take it at a high level, it comes back with one, what's the purpose of the CVC? So right up front, is it more of a financially oriented CVC where I'm just investing in companies because I'm looking for a return? Or is it a CVC that is much more strategically aligned? I'm investing in companies because I think this is a company that can really advance the mission of the company. And I think there's a combination of them. There's a mix. So I think that's the first part of the equation. And companies, I'm not going to name companies, but I can think of a few that do the strategic side, the financial side, or even a mix of both really well. Once that's the case, I think all the steps, all the pieces you outlined make total sense, right? You're looking at the alignment of the company, right? What's the team like? How are they leveraging technology? Is it the right way? What do we think the future economics look like? All really important questions. And then I think you're placing a bet, because regardless of how good you do, it's a risky business trying to create something brand new. So I think you're right on it, Michelle. I think you sort of called it out, but it's never perfect. But I do think it's an indication, like I mentioned before, that there's a lot more willingness now by these carriers and these really big companies to see the value proposition and feel like they want to play a role in it.
You use the phrase placing a bet. I worked in derivatives and risk management for about a decade. And insurers are better at risk than anyone else in the world, right? So how do you hedge those risks of working with an early stage company?
Now, I think it's smart portfolio management, right? Like you have to understand that you're not going to put all your eggs in one basket, and you want to have a portfolio that's dedicated to maybe the more riskier work. Maybe that's working with earlier stage startups, but also balancing it with some of the companies that are much more well established. Anytime you work with a partner, whether it's some of the largest partners in the world or somebody new, it comes with a different set of challenges. And so to your point, right, insurers being great risk managers, I think they are better, maybe, even though sometimes people might disagree, I think they're better at maybe planning out and understanding how to balance that portfolio of risk and do it right.
Yeah. Diversification is always a good answer to that question. Well done.
There you go.
To that whole point, one of the questions that I typically ask when we're talking to a startup and getting to know them in the solution is, who is your key customer? Who do you sell to in the insurance carrier? And that, to me, one, it is framing how can we be helpful, but also it's indicative of who your customer is, what your value proposition is, and who you can best serve in the insurance carrier. And if it's, oh, we have a lot of strategies, or sometimes we talk to this person or that person. Sometimes that works. But if you can tell me it's always the CUO or it's always the business unit leader, that just shows that there's direction and kind of that repeatability and scalability in the sales process.
I think you're right. And, I laugh at the people like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, right? Like, I know you want to sell me a solution. I get that. It's not a mystery, right? There's a relationship here, and there's a piece of that that's based on it. But understand who I am and what we do, right? Like, you guys must have heard this, because I've heard the story 1,000 times about the marketing executive who goes into like Coca-Cola drinking a Pepsi, right? Like that story. And it's like, know who I am, right? Like, know what we do, right? If I was at a life insurer and you're talking to me about health insurance, you're losing the conversation. So I think your point, right? We look at the chief HR officer as our entry point. That shows that there's thoughtfulness. There's usually, they can then give it a rationale. We talk about these 3 capabilities. You've got to do a bit of work to get that conversation forward. So I think to your point, right, asking that question, that answer they give back shows whether or not they're doing the work to really get into the company and actually establish a point of view and get people interested. So,
Terry, I'm curious a little bit, to the extent that you can share or are comfortable sharing. Are there differences with how you think about vetting startups from your prior roles at the carriers and your role now when you're trying to build an ecosystem for multiple carriers?
When it comes to vetting, no, I'll say not really, because I think it comes down to, and I mentioned this before a little bit, it starts with alignment, right? So how well does it align to the specific need you're trying to solve for? So whether that's for one carrier or multiple, I think that works. I look at the backing that the company has, right? And again, it's sort of stage dependent, but I do look at the backing and I look at the company. So I look to see, who are the people running it? Have the founders been part of other startups before? Have they had success? Right. I look at the difficulty we'll have bringing them into the ecosystem for lots of different reasons. And then I try to look at the economics. So if you follow that, it's like A, B, C, D, E. And I think that works regardless where you are, right? Alignment, backing, company, difficulty, economics. And it's sort of worked for me in the past, and it's working now to unlock companies that I think have a value prop. I won't say that model is going to guarantee success, but it at least helps me sort of differentiate the different companies. And I think it works right now, regardless of the scenario.
On backing, what's the rank order of things you look at? Is it like who, how much, what else is in there?
In my past life, I really loved working with our venture capital partners. There's a real just incredible group of people that I think have such a unique skill set to drive a value proposition for startups. And when I think about the different venture capitals, leaders that are really successful, I think they have a unique combination of a bit of math, a bit of relationship management, and a bit of magic. So those venture capital leaders, I think, put themselves in a place where the right companies backing startups can help you to not necessarily feel comfortable that the startup will be successful, but that they'll have the right guidance and support to really achieve as much as they're going to achieve. There's a set of startups that, regardless of the economic conditions that are out there, 10, 20, 40 years of return.
Yeah.
And it's not just because they have access to capital. It's because they have the knowledge to sit on boards and really understand what are the challenges the company is going to face, how to move from 2 employees to 200 or 2,000 employees. They know the right questions to ask. That might be really painful, difficult questions that might cause you a lot of agita. But if you sort of swallow them and answer those questions, you'll be better off. Look, in a great economy, you can take money from Luciani Ventures because everyone's got money. But that capital does not mean you're going to do better as a startup. It just means you've gotten some capital. So I definitely try to look for companies, for VCs that I know that have a track record of building strong portfolios, because I think it makes a tremendous difference in the success of the company.
I keep doing this. I'm like the Roman
Are you feathering
god.
again?
No, I'm not feathering. I'm like the Roman god Janus. There's always 2 faces. So you talked about what
Man, we have covered some top Janus, like Shyamalan. Like we're definitely whole spectrum here.
This is a real liberal arts tour de force going on this podcast. The other side of the coin, where does this fail? Like, what do you see as being the major hurdles and places where people stub their toes?
So when you say people, are you saying more the startups?
I'm actually interested in both. Like, where do the partnerships fail? Where do the startups screw it up? Where does the client screw it up?
Okay, so from a startup perspective, and again, I think some of it depends on the stage of the company, right? Early stage companies, if they win a big deal, I think they can lose sight of themselves and quickly become swallowed in by trying to serve that big customer. Yeah. And they're not working on their roadmap. They're not working on their strategy. They've literally devoted their entire team, all of their resources, whether it's 5 or 10 people, because they want to do well on this first project. I think that's a problem. I think, for startups that are maybe more established, they still fail at understanding how difficult it is to work with a large carrier, right? They might not understand the complexity of the processes and the paperwork and just the gauntlet of legal, technical, architecture, compliance that they have to go through. Yeah. So I think that's another challenge. I think later. Go ahead, Michelle.
I was going to say, and further to that, it's not a rinse and repeat once you've done that successfully with one carrier, right? It changes with every potential partnership that you have because of everything we know about the industry, right? Legacy systems, core systems implementations, anything else that you add, and other vendor partnerships that they've got. So I think that's the challenge too, is once some startups have success with like one big insurer, they're like, oh, we're going to have all the big insurers. And it's like, no, you're going to have the same length of a sales cycle and the same challenges, if not more, with some of these, the second, third, or fourth that you're going after.
You are so on it. I think you're so right. You have to have the right perspective and patience with this. I think it's helpful, right? If you've been through, that really large bank or really large credit card company, really large insurers processes, you sort of understand some of the expectations, but it's never the same, right? And right. I still, even larger startup companies, scale ups, right? They're sometimes astounded by the process and the paperwork and just the weird terms, the weird requirements, indemnity, liability, intellectual property. No, the enterprise is not going to want to use your paper. I don't care that that's your paper. They're going to want to use theirs. So that whole legal, rigmarole that happens, there's no fast pass. Some of the larger startups, right, they price themselves out of a great opportunity. So they meet someone at the company, they kick it off. Chris, you were talking about the relationship before. It goes really well. All of a sudden, they come up with a really good idea. They pitch that good idea and do a good demo. That good demo leads to the carrier coming back and saying, we have a good opportunity. And then that startup's like, all right, it'll be $250,000 to test, but what we'll do is we'll take $25,000 of the $250 and we'll move it towards the license cost of $2 million. And the carrier's like, okay, thanks. And the startup's shocked why they never heard back. So again, price what's reasonable for you, but don't price yourself out of that opportunity. You've done all the work, right? You've been patient. You've gotten the great opportunity. And then you're like, oh, now we can soak them. I think you got to be really careful with that. And I saw a number of companies that I really liked, even going back to them, either thought they could win a huge amount of money or just couldn't develop a pricing model that could work. So that's another issue that encountered a number of times.
Yeah, and that goes back to the relationship, right? Like understand what it's worth to them, do the discovery to figure out how much pain it's causing or the upside opportunity or whatever it is. But there are no shortcuts to that.
Bingo. I agree. If you have the right relationship, you can have those conversations up front that I think will eliminate that. And, flipping it a little bit on the carrier side, understand the companies you're working with. Like if you're choosing, and again, it depends on the culture of the organization, but if you're choosing to work with a really early stage company, they might not even have a product, and that's okay. Yeah. But just be ready for that, right? Be ready that you're going to run more of an accelerator with them, and you're going to have to almost set the right guardrails to be like, I want this company to grow. I don't want to stifle them, but I need them to work on my thing. That's hard to do, right? And with a later stage company, understand the challenges that they're trying to serve multiple clients. They do have a roadmap and you have to fit into that. You can't just bully them to do your thing. So I think there's balance on both sides, and it's really trying to go back, Chris, to the relationship, understand the relationship, understand the needs, and try to best to deliver for those needs.
Great.
Harry,
No, go, Michelle.
No, I was just going to say, I totally agree with you. And I think, especially that those early stage startups, or not even any startup, when there's a customer that says, we want this, and it's outside of their core solution, there's always a desire to do what the customer wants, but there's also that pull of, but my company's not set up for this, or it'll throw us down, burning a ton of money to get that done, and it's a one-off for you. And so but I think, to your point, the carriers have to understand that they're not the only customer, right? And so this business is built to try and service the industry at large in most cases. But I was going to shift a little bit to, I know the trends that we're seeing in my day-to-day, and generative AI is the big one, right? And a lot of it is, where can it be applied? But I'm curious what you've been hearing from your partners on where are companies seeking startup solutions today? Is it, and it could be multiple, right? I have my own opinion, but I'm curious about yours. Is it data? Is it underwriting workflows? Is it claims management? Like, where are you seeing the most desire for partnerships?
I don't know if it's the most, but yes to all of those, right? I see, I think there's challenges right now because obviously the economy is changing a bit. I think, even in the good times, right? And maybe this is a generalization, but when you look at the larger insurers, maybe it's a 90-10 split of sort of maintain versus new stuff, right? They're more focused on, fixing the current problems, driving efficiencies. And I think that still remains today. So a lot of the conversations are around capabilities to do that. Really, what are the ways that you can drive those efficiencies, drive those solutions on the work that they need to do today for their customers? It's not that they're not interested in the future stuff, but I think keeping it more grounded is some of the stuff that seems to be coming out of the conversations I'm having. Document ingestion and the ability to identify insights from that. And that in a lot of ways ties into Gen AI, right? Mm-hmm. The ability to pull together different services, aggregating, cleansing, and then delivering the right data, right? That ties right into the data space. So it's not necessarily this is the hottest areas, but it's that infrastructure to really make things better. Obviously, legacy modernization is a huge opportunity and it's a huge issue. And if I could solve that today, I'd be a billionaire. But I think it's an area that if you get startups that are really interested in solving the problem, I think they'll do quite well, because there are systems running in a number of companies that are as old as me. And I look really old. I'm not that old, but the systems are old. And, people don't want to do COBOL and VSAM. I get it, but being able to sort of unlock those legacy systems into a modern digital architecture that allows for the insurance carriers to have relationships and engage with the customers directly, there's a lot to that. So those are just the areas. Yeah.
I've made a number of COBOL jokes since we've been talking to insurance folks in the last.
Hey, COBOL, working 40 years is a pretty good statement about the language. So
I'm a recovering physicist. Like Fortran is, the language du jour there. But like that one's interesting to me because.
By the way, I'm a recovering physicist is another good line from the podcast today. So
doing my best. The pathway on that one seems pretty clear. Like you have the old school hardware, you have the new school hardware, you have the old school program, you write the new school program. And by the way, GPT-4 can just convert your code for you into whatever language you want.
Okay.
All right. I'm smoothing out some edges here. The pathway on that one, while long and difficult, is pretty clear. So where do startups help with that? I don't get that.
So you've seen the movie Independence Day with Jeff Goldblum?
Classic.
Yeah. So you just take your old MacBook and just plug it into an alien system and immediately it'll download and work. It's really just plug. It's a cable.
Yeah.
Well, companies have budgets. Those budgets to maintain these infrastructures are pretty tight. The infrastructures are systems and processes that have been built over 40 plus years. Code is not documented. In a lot of ways, the data sets are not, how should I put this? They're not as clean and as easy to work with as they could be.
Said data sets, I assumed that.
So you have a lot of challenges just managing it day to day, let alone, queuing up a project that you want to try and move it. Yeah. Where I think the startups, right, the ability to, sort of wrap around that legacy, interpreting the information that's there, being able to re-platform, those are all really big opportunities. It's just finding, founders that are passionate about it and want to do it. And I think there are companies out there that are tackling the problem. Yeah. There's not one wholesale solution. Again, it's a lot of different infrastructures, but I believe that is a huge way to unlock resources, to unlock opportunities for large carriers. And I think the company that solves it, or the companies that solve it, I think they're going to do quite well for themselves, and they're going to create a tremendous amount of value for those insurance carriers. And that's going to follow down to a lot of value for customers. I mean, just an example, and it's a silly one. I just got my life insurance premium, and I have the ability to pay by check, or I can fax in my ACH form. The reason why that is because it's really complicated to move to a digital payment solution as part of that. So I'll give some patience and understanding to the particular carrier, but that's not easy. It's a really challenging problem. It sounds so silly today that someone would even offer fax, where we live in a world of, I need a book, I can go online and order it, and it's delivered in 30 minutes. It's just, we're working with really old architectures that work. They do what they're supposed to do, but there needs to be companies to help bridge the gap to get them to the future. Yeah.
And sorry, one more question on that. Do you see that as primarily a tech play, primarily a consulting play, or is it some hybrid of the two?
Well, I believe that there are fabulous opportunities to reach out to me, and we can help you solve those problems. So there's a plug. No, I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix of architecture, technology, business, right? I have $100 that I can spend on my business. I want to take that $100 and use it to create opportunities with my customers and generate revenue. Oh, wait, you want $50 of my $100 to go here? So I think it's, business demand. I think it all comes in. It's a whole bunch of challenges. It's good challenges that we can solve for, but it's not easy. And I think it's a mix. And I know there's companies out there trying to solve the problem. I know there's a lot of interest. There's really smart people. I'm not one of them, but there's really smart people out there that can figure all this out.
You've talked about how old you are and how dumb you are. You must have some settings on Zoom that hide all of that, because it's working for you.
Okay. Yeah. So we can bring my wife in if you guys want some validation of this. So no, all kidding.
We've covered every other topic today, but
yeah, I know. Honestly, it's fun to talk about the opportunities that are out there. There are so many amazing companies that are doing really just incredible things that you might have almost thought would be impossible in the past, whether leveraging like dynamic data sets to really rethink the way we underwrite. Like that is phenomenal to me. I can ask you if you smoke, if you have any pre-existing medical conditions, and I then decide to write you a 30-year term policy. But now, done right, your cell phone, where you go, your digital health records, your shadow of all your social events, right? Again, with consent of the user, obviously, but there's so many interesting, compelling ways we can leverage technology to create incredible experiences for people, so that if I go to the gym and I eat better, maybe my, insurance cost goes down. That's exciting stuff. And there are companies in every space that are doing it, so that the claims process, dare I say, it goes from inconvenient to almost a positive experience. Companies are making it really easy in that space. There's transformative technology out there that I believe carriers are starting to adopt that really sort of makes you feel like you're a bit in the future. There's still a long way to go. We talked about the ACH and the fax, but I think there's some really exciting stuff as well. And it's fun to be even a small part of it.
Well, I think too, maybe early days of Insurtech, it was, we have to solve the biggest problems, the most complex problems in order to make a difference. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of entrepreneurs picking a lane and picking a very specific thing that they want to get good at. And it may not be the biggest impact to the whole organization, but it may be a huge impact to a single line of business, right? Or the claims process to a single line of business, or a specific type of distribution strategy. And I think those incremental wins, one, do great for the carriers to gain confidence in working with the startups, but it also puts a huge world of opportunity out there for entrepreneurs to make meaningful change and help the carriers get to that technology debt, legacy debt, to a place in your future vision, Terry.
Yeah, I think you're right. Where I look at it as, they're taking the right approach of, I think they have the vision, right? We're all familiar with that really big digital retailer that started as a bookseller, right? We all know them. And so you think about their name never made sense to me originally. Like, they sell books. It's really weird. Why are they named after a river? But when you think about it, right, it's the widest river in the world. And so from the very beginning, they had a vision of where they wanted to go, a really compelling vision that they had, but they started at a very smart step. Let's get people to understand how to shop online. Let's sell them a product that is very easy to sell online. It's not fragile. It's not going to, doesn't go stale. And they built on that, right? They built a series of steps. And I think startups, good startups, are following that, right? Where they're saying, like, look, I'm not going to solve claims tomorrow, maybe, but I can solve this piece of it. And what I know is, down the road, I have a vision for how I'll do all of claims and maybe all of insurance. And I think that perspective, that sort of philosophy, serves companies really well. Let's get really good at something. Let's sort of follow the Clayton Christensen model. And then we can build on that. And I think you're right. And I think it's a key to longevity and future success for a lot of these companies.
Well, Terry, unfortunately, I think we got to call it here, but this feels like
we're done.
6 hours. This is good stuff. I wanted to do a podcast just with your thoughts on movies, I think, as a next step.
Yeah.
Next week, let's do it. Let's do it. We got to start, though, with The Sandlot, because The Sandlot might be one of the greatest movies of all times.
Oh, man. Yeah. This might actually.
My life literally outside of work is baseball. And so there's a ton of, but Sandlot, there's a ton of baseball movies. Sandlot just sort of sets itself apart. So
over Moneyball.
It did very different. I mean, Sandlot has that link to who we are. I don't know. I mean, Moneyball's great, but you're
a relationships guy. We covered that.
Here we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well, this has been a very special episode of Unstructured Unlocked. Our guest today has been Terry Luciani, Nexus vendor ecosystem leader at Ernst & Young. I've been your host, Chris Wells.
And I've been your co-host, Michelle Gouveia.
Thanks for joining us. Terry, had a blast. Thanks a lot.
Me too. Thank you, guys. Take care.